From the heart of where innovation, money, and power collide, in Silicon Valley and beyond, this is Bloomberg Technology with Emily Chang.
I'm Caroline Hyde in New York, in for Emily Chang. This is Bloomberg Technology, and coming up in the next hour, Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, 3 other passengers make a successful trip to space. In Blue Origin's first crewed space flight, we head to Van Horn, Texas, where Emily Chang was the first to interview the world's richest man since being back on Earth. Plus, everyone wants to know what the Blue Origin flight means for the future of the space tourism. But what about the future of space investments? Sam Kurz of Cathie Wood's ARK Invest joins us to discuss. And back on Earth, big tech earnings season is in full swing, with Netflix reporting second quarter earnings, forecast for subscriber growth weighing on the stock. We have full analysis later in the hour. But first, another great accomplishment in the billionaire space race. Amazon founder Jeff Bezos and 3 others landed safely after Blue Origin's first flight to space with passengers on board. Now, the capsule reached an altitude of more than 62 miles. It's a milestone, of course, in the company's effort to make space tourism viable. Bloomberg's Emily Chang is in Van Horn, Texas, joining us now. What a day.
Caroline, you could not have written a more poetic end to this chapter in Jeff Bezos' history. This is a dream multiple decades in the making for Bezos, 21 years in the making for Blue Origin, and really every way you look at it, this was a successful launch. Jeff Bezos made history today. He pulled it off. He proved to the world that Blue Origin can ferry humans to space safely up and back down. We got to watch the launch from this vantage point. It took off right behind me. It was surreal. It was nerve-wracking at times. It was breathtaking. And after they came back down to Earth, I got the first interview with Jeff Bezos and his brother Mark, and it was kind of a special moment. Take a listen to what they had to say. Welcome back to Earth.
So good to be
How do you feel?
I feel really good.
Oh, my
Thank
goodness.
You. Really
Wow.
My brother Mark.
I mean, wow.
Yeah.
This is your first interview since landing.
Yes.
We all want to know the reality of seeing the Earth from above. Did it live up to the dream?
Beyond, honestly, I'm not talented enough to describe this in words. I can't figure it out. It was much more than I expected. It's awe-inspiring. It's just, I don't know. Do you have words?
I don't have words. It was one of the most beautiful sights I've ever seen.
So now that you're here, now that you've accomplished this, what's Blue's next move? How does this fit into the long-term vision?
Well, the long-term vision, we're building an orbital vehicle called New Glenn. And this vehicle we just flew, New Shepard, is our suborbital tourism vehicle. So we're going to fly that over and over and over. And every time we fly it, it's practice for the orbital mission. And it gives people a chance to see what we just saw, which is this fragile, beautiful Earth that you can't imagine. People can tell you about it, but until you see it with your own eyes, I don't know, maybe we need to send a poet up or something, somebody who'd be better at describing it. What I can tell you is that it's just this thing that you can't tell. You can see that it's just one place. There's no boundaries, no national lines, nothing. The atmosphere, we see this thing, it's Earth's atmosphere. It's so big, we live in it, and it seems gigantic. But when you get up there, you see that it's actually this teensy little thing that we need to protect. So, I don't know, for me, it was definitely incredible.
Yeah, it was amazing. I was surprised at how easy it was to move around in zero-G. That was probably the most surprising thing.
Yeah, it felt almost normal.
It felt
like, it felt like we were somehow evolved to be in zero-G. It felt so good.
Yeah.
So for the people here on Earth who are wondering, why are we investing all this money in space, this time in space, talk to us about how you believe this will actually help benefit us here on Earth.
Yeah, well, this is what we're doing is we're building infrastructure. This is a road. We're building a road to space so that future generations can build the future. We live on this beautiful planet. It's the most beautiful planet in the solar system by far. And we have to keep it safe and protect it. And the way to do that is slowly over decades to move all heavy industry, all polluting industry out into space. That's what we're going to do so we can keep this planet the gem that it is. But to do that, we need reusable spacecraft. We need low-cost spacecraft. And to get that, we've got to practice. And that's what this tourism mission is about.
We saw your kids greet you on the ground.
Yeah.
I have 4 kids. For the kids watching, how do you want this to inspire them?
Well, they're going to, kids are all, if every kid has so much potential inside of them. And what I hope that what we're doing a little bit and is unlocking that. So for kids everywhere, the way you unlock potential is with inspiration. I was inspired as a little boy by the Apollo astronauts, and this is the next phase of commercial space development, and I hope that inspires little kids too.
By the way, the first person to hug Jeff Bezos after this flight was his mother. Keep in mind, she had 2 sons on this flight, so as a mom, I sympathize. We also got to go with him to the landing pad. Right after that, we saw, where the rocket touched down, and the key, as he said, is reusability, and that rocket is ready to go back up again. And I said, when you going next? And he said, tomorrow. So he was clearly in a jubilant mood. I want to bring in our Ed Ludlow, who's also been with us on the ground here on the streets of Van Horn, Texas, which is home to Blue Origin. Ed, the big question is, what's next for Blue? What is the road to space tourism? They've said they've got a couple more flights planned this year. What else do we know?
Yeah, 2 flights for the rest of this year. The thing is that this space tourism business is so supply constrained. Bob Smith, the Blue Origin CEO, was saying over the weekend that there are willing and paying customers out there. Remember, the 4th seat on this mission was supposed to go to that auction winner who bid $28 million. But we're told by Blue Origin there were others that were bidding in the region of $20 million. And we're still trying to get a sense of how Blue Origin would go about pricing and charging this. But 2 missions this year, 6 paying customers on each, potentially 6 missions next year. The constraint is they only have a couple of boosters able to do this. They need to build more. And then remember, Jeff was pretty candid in that interview, Emily, that this part of the business is just a small part of a much broader plan, much greater ambitions.
Let's talk about that greater ambition, because New Shepard going up and down, taking tourists to space is one thing. New Glenn is what they're working on now. They say that's going to be ready towards the end of next year. That will do orbital missions, much more like what SpaceX is working on. When Blue Origin starts doing orbital missions, what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, look, this is a really important day for Blue Origin and a really positive day, but it's been a long time coming. Jeff Bezos founded this company in 2000, and since then, they've really fallen behind SpaceX. They were so focused on this narrow issue of sending paying customers to suborbital space that SpaceX pulled far ahead when it comes to those orbital launches, when it comes to carrying commercial payload for NASA, for private sector customers. Blue Origin wants to be in and amongst those contracts. We know that SpaceX was awarded the Lunar Lander contract, for example, for the Artemis program 2024. Blue Origin has appealed that decision. Today, Jeff Bezos was talking about how this validates their technology. He said that New Shepard is completely overkill in terms of rocket technology that it takes to get to suborbital flight. So confident that they can go beyond that, but now they have to prove it and they have to go out and win those contracts.
Do you imagine that this successful flight, this demonstration of force, of technology, puts Blue Origin in a better position with respect to NASA?
It gives them visibility. You know that I'm a space romantic, right? This is just brilliant that we have the world's richest man, the world's youngest astronaut, the world's oldest astronaut, and then some guy called Mark, his brother, taking this flight. It proves that Blue Origin is a genuine player in the eyes of the public, in the eyes of those politicians and administrators that award these kinds of contracts. They have good technology, but remember that what's going on over my shoulder where you are, they're not just sending out these rockets for suborbital spaceflight. They're testing engines that they're building for others like ULA. They're testing their other technologies, and they have a roadmap in place now to put those into the real world, or out of this world, I guess I should say.
So give us the atmosphere from the streets of Van Horn, Texas, where I know people are very proud, signs throughout the town wishing them well, and today, they clearly pulled it off.
They've been incredibly sweet and incredibly sincere. One rancher who's been here his entire life, has massive acreage nearby with his cattle, told me this is the most exciting thing to happen in his lifetime. This is a town of 2,000 people, a 2-mile stretch of road with a couple of truck stops at either end. There is nothing here, respectfully. And they've long hoped that Blue Origin would bring a space boom. It hasn't happened since the company arrived here 15 years ago, but there is a genuine feeling now that it will.
One small step for Jeff Bezos, one giant leap for space exploration, and a really exciting day for the town of Van Horn, Texas at Ludlow. Thank you so much, Caroline. A lot of emotion here. I think a lot of people are still processing this. We talked to employees on the ground here, and they're just in awe. It has been a huge haul leading up to this, and you know, today is a day to celebrate, certainly, for Blue Origin.
What a poetic pair you are, and what an amazing first interview that you managed to get running over to him, Emily. Thank you so much. Meanwhile, quite the day for Blue Origin. Meanwhile, it was quite the day for stocks too. Bloomberg's Kriti Gupta's got more, and what a bounce back.
Absolutely. Caroline, you did see green on the screen today, the biggest rally since March, but I really want to take it back to really that Blue Origin story, because you wouldn't at the top of it think that this is a market story, but it absolutely is, Caroline. Just take a look at this. A risk-on day in broader markets. So that, of course, lifted Amazon, Tesla, but Virgin Galactic down on day, one of the very few stocks that were down today. This, of course, in reaction to that launch. And, of course, in pre-market trading, you did see, as Jeff Bezos was ascending into the air, Amazon share prices were as well. And, of course, dropping were Tesla share prices as well as Virgin Galactic. So, once again, a very clear read-through into the market from that launch. But let's just zoom out for a second and see how some of those space ETFs were doing, because this is, at the end of the day, well, we've got a different chart here, but I do want to point out those space ETFs year to date haven't been performing very well. So I do want to point out some of those ARK holdings, Cathie Wood's top ARK holdings in that space exploration ETF, These are them. Look at that, green on the screen, all thinking that they're going to be thriving off of that Bloomberg, that space economy investment. I was going to say that Bloomberg is actually really monitoring this. You can find this all on the Bloomberg terminal and, of course, the Bloomberg Markets Live blog.
We love you on the M Live blog. Do tune into everything that Kriti writes throughout the day. Meanwhile, we want to thank you for that. Upcoming, we've still got the investment in space that Kriti was just discussing. Could be seen as high risk, but Cathie Wood's ARK Invest wants you to trust in the company's ETF. We talked to analyst Sam Curris about the company's big bet. That's next. And we have to talk about Netflix shares in the streaming titan, while reversing losses in extended trading. Now up after its subscriber forecast did, though, miss estimates. What are now analysts and investors liking? We'll dig into the call after the show. Stay with us. This is Bloomberg.
Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang, live in Van Horn, Texas, where Jeff Bezos, Blue Origin, and his crew have pulled off a safe and successful launch, shuttling human beings to space for the very first time, landing without a hitch. When he got to the ground, Bezos talked to us about building a road to space, building out a future space economy. So what does that mean for investing? Let's talk about that. I want to bring in Sam Curris of ARK Investment Management, an analyst in industrial innovation. Sam, so curious for your thoughts on this and what this means for the investment community. This is a successful launch. You know, when it comes to actually putting your money somewhere, placing bets, now that Jeff Bezos has pulled this off, where are you looking?
Yeah, I mean, you have Blue Origin with a successful launch. You had Virgin Galactic with a successful launch. You've got SpaceX out there, who's now taking humans to the International Space Station. What better way to show that we're in a new space age? And so when we're looking at that, when we structured our fund ARKX, we're trying to bucket into 4 different areas. So we're looking at orbital aerospace. That's the rockets and the satellites. The suborbital aerospace, so you have space tourism there and some high-flying drones that are acting as pseudo-satellites. Then you have got all of these enabling technologies coming together. So you have 3D printing that's making it possible. You've got energy storage, which is super important. You've got deep learning and artificial intelligence for these autonomous drones. And then you've got the aerospace beneficiaries. And these are the companies that are going to benefit here on Earth from all of the space activity that's going on. So that's how we think about and structure the portfolio.
Now, Bezos told me repeatedly today, this is not about escaping Earth. This is about protecting Earth. He believes Earth is the best planet. This is where we're going to want to live forever. But we're going to run out of resources, and we need to tap those resources in space. Solar energy, water from the moon, for example. That's a very different vision than what Elon Musk has put forward. He's looking to Mars. Perhaps Earth will become inhabitable. We'll need to move to Mars. I know Kathy Wood, who of course runs ARC, is a huge fan of Elon Musk. Do you see those visions being at odds, and how does that influence your strategy?
I don't think they're at odds at all. I think if we look at it today, the internet is becoming more and more of a basic human need. And right now, half the Earth's population, so like 3 billion people, don't have access to internet. And one of the ways that we're going to bring them affordable internet is through satellite internet. And so, I think a lot of memes get put out there about billionaires going to space, but all of this activity is driving down costs, and it's going to enable very affordable internet for the global population. And I don't think we can overstate how important that is.
So let's talk about cost. I mean, the tip of the iceberg here is space tourism. That is what Virgin Galactic is focused on. It's a very small part of what Blue Origin is focused on, but it's just the beginning, and it's a way that they're going to be able to make money, at least in the short term. What do you think is the real market for space tourism, and at what cost for a ticket?
Sure. So I think a lot of framing for space tourism gets put into the fact that people will spend 1% of their net worth on an incredible experience. Going to space, I think, would definitely fit in that category. And so when you look at that, you really need to bring costs down to roughly $50,000 per ticket for space tourism to become, to reach that inflection point where more people can do it. But we really think, and I think Jeff Bezos agrees, that space tourism is kind of just a way to test technology. It's a good way to commercialize it at an early stage, but he's already overpowering it. What we really see as the big opportunity is potential hypersonic point-to-point transportation. So that's not just going up for a few minutes and then coming back to the same spot. That would be going from New York to Japan in a few hours. And we think that, over the medium term, that could be a $270 billion revenue opportunity annually. Or you look at the satellite internet opportunity, and that could be $40 billion in revenue annually. So space tourism is really the first step, not what we see as the main opportunity.
Now, so much of the vision is hundreds of years out. Bezos has made it clear some of these things that he's talking about won't happen in our generation or our kids' generation or even for our children's children. How do you balance making investments for a vision that is so far away versus what can actually benefit us here in the near term?
Yeah, so I think, there's definitely the 100-year vision, but with technology, it's moving incredibly quickly. So if you go back 5 years ago, no one would have said that we could have had a reusable rocket. Here we are today where rocket landings are becoming commonplace. If we look at the active satellites orbiting Earth, roughly half of those are SpaceX Starlink satellites. So this is happening very quickly. And I think the benefits we're going to see from it are going to happen far faster than people think. If you go back, 10, 15 years, the cost to get any mass to orbit was in the tens of thousands of dollars, so roughly $12,000 to low Earth orbit. Now with SpaceX, that's come down to roughly $2,000. With the next generation of rockets coming out, that could come down to $200. And all of this is in the 5-year time horizon. So we think that these opportunities that we're investing in, it is longer term time horizon than, say, investing for the next quarter. But ARC does always take that longer term time horizon of 5 years. And we think that we're going to see an enormous amount of opportunity and commercialization in space in that time frame.
All right, Sam Corris of ARC Investment Management. It certainly is exciting to talk about. Appreciate you taking the time to join us. We're going to have much more from Van Horn, Texas, and this windy day and successful launch for Jeff Bezos when we return. This is Bloomberg.
Concerning news once again from the CDC on Tuesday that the Delta variant now makes up 83% of COVID cases in the United States. And it's the growing concern over these figures that prompted some companies to rethink their return to work plans, including Apple. Now, the iPhone maker is now delaying its office return deadline by at least a month. Bloomberg Technology's Mark Gurman broke the story and joins us now from Los Angeles. And so talk to us about what their return plans had been and what they now look like.
Yes, so Apple had been aiming to have all employees back in the offices globally by the beginning of September, in the first 2 weeks of September, on a plan that would see employees in the office on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays, with remote work optional for some employees on Wednesdays and Fridays. Now they're delaying that return to offices until October 1st at the earliest, so about a 1-month delay or so. But my understanding is that this is more of an indefinite delay, and Apple's going to give staff a 1-month notice before a return is ultimately required.
Okay, and so then are they rethinking that plan, that model that they put in place in terms of the certain days working and certain remote? Is that going to evolve as well, do you think, Mark?
As of now, that same 3-day plan, 2-day remote plan is in place. This is a hybrid plan that they're going to be launching upon that return, and it's going to last into 2022. At that time, Apple's going to reevaluate what needs to be done, whether that's allowing more remote options or if that is to tighten things up and require 5 days back into the office. But I think a lot of that is dependent both on employee feedback and what the COVID-19 situation is at the time.
Mark, it almost felt like Apple stores were at one point almost a sort of arbiter of where we were in the COVID journey and Apple's decision making on opening and then shutting them. Where are we in the store process and what's protocol like?
I agree with you. Apple is often a barometer through this whole process, both for the stock market, what other companies are doing, and the situation with COVID in general. So based on that logic, I have bad news for you, because now, after about a month, Apple's having masks back on as a requirement for many retail store employees. About half the stores across the US are now going to require retail store employees to wear masks once again after dropping that requirement in mid-June. And in addition, they're urging the mask requirement for the rest of all the retail staff globally. So required in some states, but strongly recommended elsewhere.
And also that global nature, the return to office, is that all looking the same, whether it be in Cupertino or elsewhere?
Apple's return to office plan is the same globally. Of course, that October-September date, that time frame, that was a deadline, right? That was sort of when the last time where you're able to come in to meet the requirements. There are already many Apple employees back. There are offices in Asia, the Asia Pacific area, some of the offices in Europe, right? Those are already, pretty much filled up. It's in Silicon Valley where you're seeing some engineers, really concerned about returning.
Mark Gurman, always scoop after scoop. We thank you, Bloomberg Technologies, Mark. Thank you. Meanwhile, coming up, no royal treatment for Netflix as the streaming giant forecasts sluggish growth. We'll dive into the numbers after the break. Plus,
we're here at the landing pad, and this is the rocket that just took Jeff Bezos to space, and he hopes that millions will follow him.
we'll head back to Van Horn for more of our coverage of Blue Origin's successful space launch and what this means for the future of space tourism. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Caroline Hyder in for Emily Chang. And let's get more, of course, on the big earnings to kick things off. Netflix. Kriti Gupta's got more.
Absolutely, Caroline. 1.5 million subscribers last quarter. That's compared to the 1.1 million estimate. Now, of course, that's going to be last quarter. The real game changer is what's happening next quarter. So immediately when those earnings hit, you saw a little bit of a drop. The estimate there being 5.9 million subscribers. Netflix only saying next quarter, they only see 3.5. That really tanked the stock until recently, where we start to see some of those losses recouped in after-hours trading. But I really want to show you what happened with some of its competitors during the day. This is some intraday charting of some of its competitors. Disney, Comcast, Viacom, all involved in those streaming services. During the day, they actually held up. Netflix going into their earnings story after the close, 30 minutes before the close, started to see their stock drop. You did not see that in some of these other stocks. It is worth mentioning, though, Caroline, in after-hours trading, when those Netflix results came out, you did start to see some of these names trade in sympathy. The question is, does that continue on to tomorrow? We'll just have to wait and see. I do want to broaden it out before I let you go into some of the other sectors of tech, because today was a risk-on day, and when it came to tech, it did not discriminate. You did see, of course, the NASDAQ 100 much, much higher, not as big as some of those cyclical names, but still a 1.2% gain is nothing to scoff at. And of course, that came down to semiconductors, biotech stocks, and even those Chinese ADRs, which, Caroline, we know those have been under pressure because of those regulatory scrutiny. Today, they attracted investors.
Crypto didn't play, though. Still down. Kuri Gupta, always great to get her analysis across these markets. Let's dig back into Netflix, where she started. Shares were down as much as 6% at one point in late trading, now managing to push back higher. But we're still worrying about the subscriber forecast. Analysts, as Kruti was saying, 5.8 million they saw. Well, they're getting a guidance of 3.5 million coming from Netflix. They're always pretty conservative, but is this more than we're expecting? Andre Swanston's with us of True Optic to discuss his earnings report. And Andre, I know you're a man who thinks that it shouldn't all be about subscriber growth, but were you taken aback by the future forecast?
I was a little bit. In terms of, I think everybody has known that the international is where the growth opportunity has been probably for the better part of the last 2 years. 2020, because of the COVID bounce, so to speak, I think the domestic number was a bit inflated. I think the bigger concern, though, which I've been sounding the alarm on for some time, is that Netflix really needs to diversify their revenue stream. They were the first mover, all the way back when it came to DVDs and then streaming and then international. But they've really been lagging behind the other competitors in terms of ways to diversify that revenue stream. And with the slowing subscriber numbers, I think are why the street is probably more concerned about that now.
And to actually see 400,000 subscribers lost in the second quarter in North America, that's something to really make you sit up and listen. And therefore, they have been starting to hint at ways of diversifying. Of course, they're offering gaming, a story that our own Mark Gurman and Lucas Shaw broke for Bloomberg. What do you think of that move into gaming? Because, as you say, they're a little bit behind.
Well, the move to gaming is one that I've been talking about for quite some time. I think the general strategy that I think myself and others have shared is that gaming was a natural evolution for Netflix because of the shift to cloud gaming and streaming and their large subscriber base. Also, another way to diversify would be adding a cheaper ad-supported tier. The one concern that I would have if I were them relative to gaming, normally they're the first mover in everything that they've been successful at from the founding of the company. And they've also been able to outspend historically others. But when it comes to these cloud-based streaming gaming, they're amongst the last to do so. And they're really not going to be able to outspend Microsoft and Amazon and others in the space. And so will they have to acquire a gaming studio or do other things to make that more of a viable expansion opportunity for them?
Why don't you think they can outspend? They're looking to up their spending on content to $12 billion. What stops them being able to catch up organically if they just throw money at the situation?
So what we've seen over the same period, say in 2021, where their subscriber growth has dramatically slowed on the streaming video side, you've seen other diversified media companies, the Comcast, the Viacom, CBS, and others that have their ad-supported AVOD solutions as well as SVOD solutions have massive growth, not only in subscribers, but in ad dollars and ad revenue, time spent. And then they have many other revenue streams as well. And so the concern is if everybody else is starting to see more and more time and more audience on their streaming solutions, that's even more motivation for their competitors to spend more. And then their competitors have other revenue streams. And so, Netflix spends $12 billion. What's to stop Amazon from spending 13 or 14 or others? And so I just don't think that it was okay to get into that arms race when other people weren't really playing 5 years ago and they were kind of spending against themselves. But now there's a ton of competition from companies that are really ready to take that next step.
Okay, so let's talk about diversification, not just only in offering it to gaming, but you talk about this ad model, which, I immediately start to think of Spotify, for example, where you can have these two layers, a cheaper version, ad-supported, or a premium version. And Spotify, of course, have been diversifying, getting more into podcasts and the like. What do you make of other areas in which Netflix can diversify its revenue?
Look, I think the trifecta would be for Netflix to really be a behemoth when it comes to what I call the watch, listen, play strategy. So they already are the leader in terms of watch, right? In terms of the ability to have streaming. Listening would be music, buying a Spotify or getting into streaming. They have a massive consumer base all over the world and could do so. And the play is, there's more gamers and more time spent and attention and more revenue in gaming than TV and music combined. And so that's something that they've already shown they're getting into. But with the ability to distribute content over the internet all over the world, I feel like they're missing out on lots of revenue opportunity and kind of just tripling down on their core competency, which didn't work well for Blockbuster, and that's so we'll see how that works for Netflix.
I'm sure they know well the Blockbuster story, and having seen it unfold in front of their eyes and been the reason for their demise. What's your take on the global story here? Because when you're looking at the numbers, Europe, it's a bit of a slowdown, Latin America as well. I thought these were the areas that they should be really showing sort of serious strength in.
Yeah, so what you're also seeing is in these markets, there's local players that have access to, that have the rights to a lot of the local in-language content in certain markets. And so that has put, over the last few years, a lot of pressure on Netflix to produce original content in those markets, which they've actually done quite well at and had some huge success, and also been able to bring back some of that content domestically with subtitles and so forth. I think in some of these markets you're seeing, which I think is concerning, you're seeing less opening up post-COVID than you have in the US. And so even though there's still a lot of lockdowns and less of the open economy in some of these markets, for them seeing subscriber growth would also be a slight concern as well.
Really interesting stuff. Of course, Money Heist, many people's favorite, and still waiting for the next iteration of that to come onto their screen soon. True Optics CEO Andre Swanston. Really great to have some time with you. Thank you for the deep dive. Meanwhile, we want to talk about another story. The White House has confirmed that President Biden will name a long-term Google critic as the head of the Justice Department's antitrust division. This move to nominate Jonathan Cantor is the latest sign that the administration is preparing a broad crackdown on big tech. For more on this Bloomberg scoop, we're joined by Bloomberg reporter Jordan Fabian from Washington, D.C. I made a mouth movement because Jonathan Cantor, we know, has been pretty anti-alphabet for years now. So what does that mean for big tech, Google, and its competitors?
Well, the most immediate consequence, if Mr. Cantor is confirmed to that position, is this existing antitrust lawsuit against Google that's been filed by the federal government, which is going after their search business and accusing them of cutting deals with Apple and other companies about for distribution. So I think that would be the first battlefield that Cantor would fight this fight on. But also there's another lawsuit that could be refiled against Facebook. And so there's certainly a lot of issues here that are bubbling up. And that will be an immediate charge for Mr. Cantor again if he is confirmed. Let's
just line up, Jordan, sort of the timelines for all of these things, because we sort of have felt for a long time that this administration is serious about antitrust, and there's a focus not only from some of the regulators but also from Congress itself in terms of changing law. But then we think it's going to be all focus, and then the FTC backs away from some of its law. Well, is it pushed away in terms of its focus on Facebook, for example? So what's the most imminent antitrust threat, shall I call it that, facing some of these big tech companies right now?
Well, I think if you're looking at sort of processes, you look at the FTC and you look at Congress, it takes a longer time for them to act, because on the FTC, you need a majority of that 5-member panel to move ahead with actions. Congress can take even longer to pass new antitrust laws into effect that would impact technology companies. The Justice Department, the antitrust chief, has wide latitude to file lawsuits and to push ahead with litigation against these companies. And so I would think you would look to that division, the antitrust division, for the most immediate action on some of these issues facing big tech companies.
Bloomberg News, Jordan Fabian on the news there. Interestingly, Alphabet still rose 1.3%, so investors not too worried about it imminently. Meanwhile, coming up, we continue our conversation about the future of the space industry. The CEO of a 3D rocket printing startup. Oh, and did we tell you he started out at Blue Origin? That's next. This is Bloomberg.
I'm Emily Chang, live in West Texas, where Jeff Bezos has achieved a victory of historic proportions, launching and landing a rocket carrying humans for the very first time. Again, this was a journey 21 years in the making. Many Blue Origin employees worked very hard over all those years to make this dream a reality. One of them was Tim Ellis, who worked at Blue Origin for several years, then went on to found his own rocket-making company, Relativity Space. Tim Ellis, CEO of Relativity, joining us now to reflect on what we saw here today. And Tim, I'm so curious for you as a Blue Origin employee, former Blue Origin employee who knows so much about what went on behind the scenes here, the blood, the sweat, the tears. What was it like for you to watch this today?
Well, it was a pretty awesome moment. I first started as an intern at Blue Origin. Actually interned 3 times back to back, starting in 2011. So the whole company was only about 150 people at the time. And because of the small size, I've actually kept in touch with Jeff during the years. He even came out to visit us not too long ago at Relativity. So I've been a huge fan ever since I've left. And it really is pretty amazing, not just to see Blue Origin fly, but also Virgin Galactic, just a little bit before. So really 2 pretty huge human spaceflight milestones right next to each other. Pretty amazing.
So what does this all mean? And, obviously having worked here, understanding a little bit more how Jeff Bezos thinks, when he landed, he articulated to me this vision again of building a road to space, building out a space economy in a way to protect the Earth. What do you imagine the next move for Blue Origin will be? What is the next priority?
Yeah, so definitely the New Shepard program, and I think Jeff made a bold move to fly on the first human capsule flight. But of course, this has been in testing for a long time. They're also developing an orbital rocket called New Glenn, which seeks to be reusable for the first stage. It's quite huge, so it's a heavy lift rocket that they're launching from Cape Canaveral, and that's going to be a huge milestone. But to your point on vision, I think as I've talked to Jeff and heard him speak as well, it's really about having millions of people living and working in space and moving heavy industry off planet Earth into space itself. And I think that's really what inspired me to start Relativity, was this idea that we need to actually build an industrial base on Mars and on other planets, and that this is a really important vision to go after. Of course, I think there's a lot of conversation around this, that this is just billionaires launching themselves into space and that there's so many problems on Earth. But I think we do have to actually, as a species and civilization, think about what is the future vision of humanity and what is this all about. And it's very worthwhile to have a small fraction of our resources going to making this amazing future in space happen.
Now, the key to building out that space economy is obviously reusability. It's something that I know occurred to you while you were working here. You're now focused on 3D printing rockets. If you could achieve that, what would that pave the way for? How would that go towards building out the future space economy?
Yeah, of course. So first off, I think 3D printing and reusability are not mutually exclusive. So Relativity is actually now designing a fully reusable, entirely 3D printed rocket. So the first stage and second stage and payload fairing will all be reused. It's our newest rocket called Terranar, which we're actually currently nearly complete printing the first dome for. That's the 16-foot diameter dome. So we're already building it. And really, 3D printing is at the forefront of software-driven manufacturing. So I see it as an automation technology. I actually started the metal 3D printing program at Blue Origin before I started Relativity. And I think they're still doing amazing things with 3D printing rocket engine chambers and parts of their product. But I really saw the future being a whole new tech stack for aerospace. That if we could print not just bits and parts of a rocket, but the entire thing, and throw away all of the old factory and build a whole new way of doing things, that this would really be the future of space, and seeing that happen much faster. So going from raw material to a rocket complete in less than 60 days is the target I've set for the team, and we're certainly going to achieve that over the next couple of years.
Now, if there's one thing we've learned about space, is that these milestones take a long time to hit. Obviously, this was a long journey for Blue, and certainly if you go back in space development history, we're going back decades. And I'm curious if there were times while you were working here where you thought, this is so hard. I don't know if we can pull it off. If you have those moments still today, working on such hard, difficult technology where literally lives are at stake.
Yeah, I mean, for sure it's hard and challenging. I think that's actually partially what draws some of the best engineers in the US to making the space industry happen. And at Blue Origin, no, I always thought that Jeff and the team over there were gonna get it done. I was really confident about it. That's why I decided to work there. And clearly today is a huge milestone that I hope they're celebrating really hard, because there's a ton of hard work into it. But I really think over the last couple of years, the pace of milestones in the rocket industry, satellites, companies getting private funding from venture capital has accelerated extraordinarily to a pace not seen before. I think that will continue as long as people execute. And I think it's really just bringing that Silicon Valley ethos into an aerospace world where we test things, we try things out very quickly. It's all about rate of learning, trying new ideas. And you're really seeing that pay off now with the pace of innovation that's happening.
All right, well, we're certainly seeing the private rocket industry taking off, so to speak. Tim Ellis, CEO of Relativity, thanks so much for sharing your perspective here with us. We're going to have more on Jeff Bezos' historic trip to space from Texas after the break. This is Bloomberg.
Let's don't forget, because people say, what in the world is this doing for us on our lives on the face of the earth? Look at all the spin-offs. Look at all the discoveries. Look at all the new technology that improves our lives. There's a lot spin-offs coming from the space program.
NASA Administrator there, Bill Nelson, outlining the benefits of all this renewed interest in space exploration. Let's get back to today's space accomplishments and head to Van Horn, Texas, where both Bloomberg's Emily Chang and Brad Stone were able to watch Jeff Bezos head to space firsthand. And Emily, first and foremost, just the excitement seemed so palpable.
The excitement was palpable. You definitely held your breath for a moment. The rocket took off, and there was a moment where I was just watching it, and suddenly it occurred to me again that Jeff Bezos and 3 other people were on that rocket, and were they going to make it? It was intense, and it also just went so fast. Remember, this is an 11-minute trip up and down. After 2.5 minutes, there's separation, and the crew capsule is going onward and upward into space. So I liken it to a roller coaster, but maybe twice as long. It was quick. You know, I want to know from Brad, because he's been covering Amazon and Jeff Bezos since 1999, when it was just a shell of an online bookstore. Brad, what was taking in that moment like for you?
I agree, Emily. It was electric. It was a great day for Blue Origin. The eyes of the world were on the company. We're on here, Bezos' ranch outside Van Horn, Texas. But, you know, I'm struck by how Blue Origin really desperately needed this day. I mean, this is a 20-year-old company that's been working on a suborbital spaceship for really more than 15 years and didn't have a lot to show for it. So today was sort of validating for Bezos. It puts Blue Origin kind of back in the game, and that's a game really where, frankly, SpaceX has kind of dominated over the past few years.
So given that you've written a couple of books about Amazon and Jeff Bezos, the big question is what's next for him? He talked about spending a lot more time at Blue Origin, a lot more time on the Bezos Earth Fund. But what do you think the next chapter of the Bezos journey will be?
It's interesting. The Bezos Earth Fund, $10 billion to fight climate change. He announced today this $200 million in awards for what he is calling the Courage and Civility Fund. I think it's a kind of solutionism, like looking at the biggest problems and having a faith that technology can help solve them. And so I think we're going to see a lot of kind of big, bold swings from Bezos, and also in his personal life, right? He's building this yacht. He bought the Geffen estate for $165 million last year. He seems to be kind of moving into a stage of his career where he just kind of wants to do big things.
Emily, you made it personal in that way, asking that question of him as like you as a mother of 4, him hugging his own mother as he came off on board. It was a deeply emotional moment and probably terrifying, I'm sure. But tell us about, there's also been this deep criticism of billionaires basically racing each other and what that money could also be spent on. How do you feel he fended off that criticism? Brad, just speaking of the money he gave away today.
Well, look, he insisted over and over again that this was not about escaping Earth. This was about improving Earth. And, it's not about going to Mars or living on another planet. It's about tapping resources in the solar system, whether it's solar energy or water from the moon, to power the future that we want on the most beautiful planet that we know. And I thought it was really interesting. Brad and I were both in this press conference today. And Brad, I'm curious what you thought of him giving away all that money at the end. What did you make of that?
I think he's at a moment in his career where, one, I think he's receptive to the criticism of billionaires, and him in particular, as the wealthiest person in the world. And two, he's looking to create solutions. And I think he's been disturbed, probably like a lot of the rest of us, in how public discourse has turned so uncivil and dysfunctional. And this is an attempt to correct it, and we'll see if it works.
Of course, Van Jones himself.
Caroline, would you take a seat?
Yes.
We've been taking bets. Would you take a seat if you were offered?
Yeah, definitely. Whether I have to negotiate with my husband
Brad?
and my kids.
Yeah. Brad?
After today, I might consider it. They made it seem, pretty enticing. How about you, Emily?
I don't know. I FaceTimed with my kids after the launch, and I decided I had to wait a little longer. So jury's still out there, but it was still an amazing day.
Yeah, you made it amazing, guys, out there. You brought it all to life. We thank you. What a long day. Go rest up, enjoy. That's it from Bloomberg Technology. Make sure you tune in tomorrow. We've got so many guests for you. This is Bloomberg.